Hello, welcome to the Bitcoin Standard podcast. Our guest today is Econ Bro. Econ Bro is an Austrian economist and a libertarian from Nigeria. And his life quest is to spread the ideas of property rights, free markets, sound money, individual liberty, and personal responsibility in his country. I've come to know Econ Bro on the internet over the past few months, and I've been pretty impressed with the amount of effort and dedication that he is putting into these efforts of raising awareness of these economic ideas in his country. And I'm very impressed with what he's doing, and I thought it would be great to have a discussion with him. So, Econ Bro, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. So let's begin with your background. What got you interested in Austrian economics of all things?
So I studied economics, regular Keynesian economics at university. And I studied economics because I genuinely wanted to find solutions to the economic problems in my country. I live in Nigeria, and obviously Nigeria is not a prosperous nation in any sense of the word. So I decided to be the one to make a difference, right? So I went to school and I learned economics, and my goal was, as I said, my goal was to fix the Nigerian economy. And after I'm studying economics at the university, I had my sights set on furthering my education. I wanted to get my master's degree and then my PhD, but I wanted to do it at the best institutions in the world. And at the time, the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, was ranked number 6 for economics in the entire world. So I wanted to travel to America and get to go to Caltech and, develop myself. So I couldn't afford to pay the tuition for Caltech. So I just decided I was going to read up online, right? And then in doing that, going online to read stuff, I came across the works of people like Milton Friedman and F.A. Hayek. So that was the beginning of my journey into free market economics. I had never heard anything like what Friedman and Hayek were saying. I eventually got introduced to Thomas Sowell. And so I was at that level, Hayek, Friedman, Sowell. I was at that level for many, many years, about a decade, until 2021 or 22. I think I'm fuzzy on the details. 2022, I was watching a podcast and Dave Smith, Larry Sharp, and Spike Cohen were talking to Patrick Bet-David. And I had heard a lot. So I considered myself a political conservative. Being a Christian, a religious person, I identified as a political conservative at the time. So I knew a lot about conservatism. I used to hear people talk about libertarianism, but I didn't really know what libertarians were about. I thought they were just, as I say, I thought they were conservatives who wanted to smoke weed and have abortions and like taxes a little bit, hate and like taxes less than conservatives. That was what I thought. So I decided to give libertarians a chance on that day, and I was watching the podcast, and I realized that I was in agreement with everything I heard. Right, I agreed with everything they said. There weren't things I necessarily knew before that day, but hearing those ideas, they resonated with me. I was like, this is more correct than what the beliefs I currently hold to. And then in that interview, the host, Patrick Bet-David, said I've told this story like a million times. He said to Dave Smith, what problem do you libertarians have with someone like a Milton Friedman? And I wanted to hear, because Milton Friedman was like God to me at the time. And then he said he has nothing against Milton Friedman, that he's more of a Rothbardian. So I was curious, Rothbardian, what's that? So I looked it up, and then I found out Mary Rothbard, and of course that then leads to Mises. I had heard of Ludwig von Mises, but I never read anything from him. I never paid any attention to him. So Rothbard led me to Mises, and then Hopper, and then Hazlitt, and pretty much the entire Austrian school of economics. So that's how I got into. So I started to read all that stuff. I read Man, Economy and State, Theory of Money and Credit, economics, so pretty much everything. I've read Joe Salerno's books, Hopper's books. and that's how I got to where I am now. And yeah, that's my story in a nutshell.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think there's a clear path that you sketched out. I share something very similar for it. Initially, you hear about Milton Friedman, and then you start upping the dose a little bit. You go with Friedrich Hayek, and then you up the dose with Mises, and then
Yeah.
Rothbard.
Yeah.
And then I think the final level, I would say, is Hans Hermann Hoppe.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree.
He's the most one way, one bad way of putting it would be to say the most extreme, but I think the more accurate way of putting it would be most consistent, where he applies this
More consistent,
ruthlessly
exactly.
to all ideas.
Yes.
Yeah, he applies this ruthlessly
Yes.
to all the ideas, whereas I think all the previous ones, you see this to varying degrees. Even with Mises, there is the classical liberal conception of the state is a lot more statist than what Hoppe would have today, and I think it's understandable. Mises grew up in Vienna pre-World War I, so he thought as the state could be some civilized people living under a gold standard and trying to take decisions in the public good. Hoppe lives 100 years later, and he's seen
He has seen the ills of the state. Yeah.
how this state has been used and how the money has been
Yeah.
used. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it becomes a lot more radical in your conception of it, of what needs to be done and how things are shaped. So then, okay, so you got down this path, and then what made you decide that you wanted to talk about it to Nigerians? And do you do this full time, or do you do other things, or is this part of some other work you're doing?
So what made me decide to do this is the same drive I had as before I got into the university. I wanted to fix my country. It's not I'm not doing it out of altruism. It's not like I'm doing it for selfish reasons, because the country is literally falling apart, right? And everyone is leaving, people are jumping ship, and things are getting worse, literally getting worse every year. The money is absolute rubbish, or rather the currency, because it's not money. Our currency is absolute rubbish. The economy is in shambles. Businesses are leaving. Crime is at an all-time high. Things are really terrible, right? And then everyday people like myself fall victim to crime and all kinds of horrors. So if I'm going to live in this country, if I'm going to raise a family in this country, I it can't remain like this. It can't remain like this. So I set out to, and I'm just the kind of person who can't just sit by while things are going bad. I can't stomach it. So I decided I was going to do something about it, and then I started to teach young people. So I reached out to students at one university here. I spoke to some of them about the ideas, and they had heard nothing of the sort ever. But the ideas, as you know, are very compelling. They're not as boring, as rigid as the mainstream economics. So they were very receptive to the ideas, and then they assembled more students, and then I hosted my first seminar sometime last year. So I would like to do it full time, but I don't have the means to do that. So I only do it part time when I can. Yeah, so that's pretty much why I do it and how I do it.
And so I make it you've quit the plans to do a PhD, right?
Oh, no, no, no. I have no business with that whatsoever. I have no interest in. I mean, I'm kind of glad that I didn't make it to Caltech, because I know California is the seat of nonsense in the world. So I don't think I would have been. I don't think I would have been a leftist. But there is no way in the world that I would be where I am intellectually if I had gone to Caltech. It's highly unlikely that I would have been where I am. Yeah.
I mean, you'd still have had the same internet. I think you would have found your way toward the right ideas. If you could do it in Nigeria, I think you could do it in California. You can do it in anywhere. I came across these ideas when I was in New York at Columbia University doing my PhD. Unfortunately, I wasn't as smart as you. I figured it out in the last couple of years of my PhD, which you got the better end of that deal because you didn't spend 5 years getting a piece of paper instead of doing something productive with your time.
It's interesting that you, of all people, figured it out after your or during your PhD. It's interesting. I thought you've been on this for decades. I didn't know that about you.
No, well, I mean, it has been a decade and a half, but I'm old, so a decade and a half ago
Oh,
I was
okay,
doing my
okay,
PhD, and
okay.
that's when I
Fair
was
enough.
starting to, actually more than a decade and a half, 2007, so 17 years.
Oh,
That's when I
wow.
started
Okay, that's
to think about this, but I was already in grad school at that time, so it was my third or fourth year in my PhD, third year of my PhD is when I started to really. I mean, it started off, I would say, with Karl Popper, who led me down the path of Hayek, and then after that, Mises, Rothbard, and then you discover Mises.org, and you start spending all the
yeah,
time you should be working on your PhD, you spend it reading Mises.org. And then the
yeah.
global financial crisis happens in 2008, and you're absolutely astonished at how different you are able to see things because you've read Mises and Rothbard, and how different everybody else around you sees this. And it could drive you mad in a place like Colombia. But fortunately, I managed to maintain my sanity and got my degree and got out, and then started to try and figure out how to fix this catastrophe. And then, of course, Bitcoin came along, gave us the
Yeah.
way to do it. Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting that you've been on this since 2007. I had no interest in anything of the sort. I mean, I'm not a Gen Z individual. I'm a millennial. I'm in my late 30s. Let me put it that way. But in 2007, I had no interest in any of these things. I was a different person back then. So it's very. I wouldn't have figured that you were you did your PhD in 2007. I wouldn't have figured at all. You don't look old enough to have done your PhD back then. Yeah, so I guess it's a compliment.
Thank you, I guess. Yeah, I blame the meat on keeping me young looking.
Have you been on the carnivore diet for a long time?
9 years.
So I didn't catch that.
9 years.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's
9 years this week, actually. This is my 9th anniversary. I remember
wow.
it very well.
Strictly
Yeah.
carnivore, just beef, no eggs, no nothing else.
Beef and red meat, and a little bit of fish and a little bit of chicken.
Okay. Okay.
But
Okay.
basically red meat, not even dairy or eggs, just red meat. It's very simple. You're made out of red meat and you should eat red meat. It's really that simple. If you know anything more about nutrition science and then that knowledge leads to you eating anything other than red meat, that knowledge is counterproductive. You don't need to learn nutrition science. You just need to know that you're made out of red meat, so you should eat red meat and use your brain for other things.
So I get it. I'm on board with the carnivore diet, although it's not something that we can afford here. Meat is really expensive here, so it's quite difficult to. I've tried it for a period, and when I tried it, my health improved. I used to be very sick, but that really helped me. Among other things, it helped me break out of the sickness spiral that I was going down a while ago. So I'm totally on board. I don't use vegetable oil, seed oils anymore. So I don't use seed oils anymore. I don't touch seed oils. I've cut down my sugar. I don't eat as yeah. So I'm trying my best since I can't go on the carnivore diet because of where I live. But yeah, I'm on board. If I could, I would be on the carnivore diet 100%. Yeah,
I think it's the biggest misconception people have about this is that it is expensive. It's actually very, very cheap. You could do it for close to zero because you could just go to your butcher and tell him to give you the leftover scraps of bones and meat, and then you can boil these and drink the water and eat
broth.
the meat and eat the bones. After a while, the bones become soft enough that you can eat them.
Yeah.
So I don't take that as an acceptable excuse ever. It's never too expensive because anywhere in the world, butchers would give you their scraps for
Oh no,
free or for very close to free.
they will. Yeah, they will. It's not even close to free here. It's not close to free. It's not as expensive as buying
Oh,
actual
okay.
meat, but it's not close to free here. Like everyone
Oh,
is
really?
dirt. People are really poor. So, um, I mean, even selling the scraps could fetch them some money. So there is high demand for. I mean, there are people who actually just go to buy scraps. So as the demand for the scraps increase,
Okay.
the price would follow. So it's really not that.
Yeah.
Easy. And then you need to use gas to cook your food, right? So and that's very gas is really expensive here. So
Yeah.
imagine boiling bones for what 7 8 hours for it to get soft enough for you to be able to eat it easily. You would run out of gas in like 3 days, and then so it's I'm not trying to I'm not a poor person. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not like poverty stricken or anything, but I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
not easy. Yeah. So
Yeah, but I mean, people also underestimate the costs involved with other foods. So when you're eating other things, you're constantly hungry and you're constantly needing to snack and constantly needing to buy small bits of food here and there. Whereas if you're just eating meat, you need one or two big meals a day, and then you're set for the whole day, and then you don't need to be spending money on small little things, snacks here and there, and little sugar hits, which can add up. And then, of course, the real cost is in the long term in the health
your
effects
health,
of
yeah,
this. So, yeah,
yeah.
that's why it's even if it's expensive, it's still a bargain. I think.
I guess I'm doing a lot of fasting. That's one of the things I'm doing now. It works for me. I used to be much not I wasn't fat or anything, but I was much bigger than I am now. So I've been doing a lot of fasting. Most of our food here is carbs, right? We have a very carb rich diet: yams, rice, cassava, plantains. Everything we eat is carbs, right? Because obviously it's very that grows cheap here. It's relatively affordable, or at least it used to be before our recent inflationary spiral, um, downward spiral.
Yeah,
So it's we have very carb rich diet. So if carbs can be very filling. So if you eat carbs in the morning and eat carbs at night, you're good. You don't have the urge to snack. However, that has its disadvantages, which is why I go with fasting.
yeah.
So as an alternative.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of these problems in Nigeria. Of course, inflation is a major one. So your currency's done a spectacular dive against the US dollar over the past few years. So let's see here. About a year and a few months ago, it was only at 500 nairas to a dollar,
Yeah.
and now it's at 1,600. So nice
Yes.
little 60-70% drop in a matter of 9 months or so.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations, I guess.
It's very very terrible. It's so a lot of people don't notice this in my country. Nobody notices it. I'm about the only myself and a couple of my friends were the only ones who talk about this thing in the country. So no one. So right now, the consciousness that inflation is as a result of expansion of money and credit is beginning to get into the public consciousness. So people are beginning to talk
Okay,
about it
good.
online. So, however, you only hear them say things like there's so much money chasing. So what they're calling for, they're not calling for zero inflation. They're calling for less inflation. That's the problem. So you still hear people talking about inflation targeting and all that kind of nonsense, right? Rather than just cutting off the head of the beast altogether. So one thing that no one has noticed here, even despite the fact that inflation is becoming it's a part of the public consciousness here. No one has noticed the consequences of inflation, cultural consequences specifically. So I know you understand the fiat phenomenon better than most people and how fiat affects everything. Before I knew that you wrote about that stuff, you spoke about that stuff. I was already talking about how fiat currency is responsible for the decline in product quality. So everything that's bad, I know it's a running joke among libertarians. Anything that's bad, we say. So if it's because we have these prosperity preachers in this part of the world, and they've gone rabid. So we are like we say fiat pastors. So if anything is bad, we just put fiat in front of it, and people think we're just joking. We are joking, but we are actually serious. The fiat phenomenon.
Yeah, just because we're joking doesn't mean we're wrong.
Yeah. So it's affecting not just the economics of things. It's affecting product quality. It's affecting the quality of the people, which is so just buckle up for this. So Nigeria has a very serious kidnapping problem where and all this started around. Now we've always had kidnapping, right? Every society in the world has some form of kidnapping or the other, but um, it was sort of dialed to 11 at about 2021 when this horrible inflation spiral began, right? It just amplified. So we have horrible cases of kidnapping where these people kidnap mothers, husbands, children. They kidnap people for ransom. When the inflation hit, people became very poor very fast, right? So, and when people are poor, they tend to do things that they would not normally do, right? Because now they need to survive. It's about survival for them, and if they can't survive, if their salaries are not sufficient to meet their needs, they will start to turn to crime, start to do all sorts of heinous things, and that has led to women to go into prostitution and men into all sorts of horrible vices. No one has made the connection that these things made a frightening resurgence in that 2021, between 2021 and today. No one has made that connection. I'm literally the only one talking about it, but people think I'm crazy when I say it. We've always been poor, but the inflation made us extremely poor overnight, and then that led to these things as a result.
Yeah, I think most people tend to react to these kind of conclusions with incredulity because I think that's propaganda. I think generally when people are activated to respond in a certain way, which is mocking toward a new idea that they're not familiar with, there generally is, you'll see that at the base of that, there's some kind of propaganda that has been influencing how their little brains deal with these things. And so inflation, I think, is one of these sacred cows. Now, you've studied and read economics. You know just how much academic research is being done on all kinds of extremely arcane phenomena and the effects that they'll have. I mean, I studied development economics. I know about economists who travel and spend 4 or 5 years in a tiny little village in the middle of nowhere in India or in Africa or in Latin America and studying the impact of some kind of obscure intervention. What happens if we take those kids' lunch and replace it with this particular meal so we increase this nutrient by that much? And then what's the impact going to be on this or that, or transfer payments to the parents, or extra investment in some kind of new educational technology? An extremely elaborate question design and an extremely elaborate research methodology and extremely expensive research projects that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and yield nothing but a bunch of papers that are going to be published in an academic journal, which nobody will read. But it's an astonishing amount of brain power being dedicated to a very straightforward little question, which most people can answer intuitively with very obvious answer, which is, yeah, if you give kids more food, they'll probably do better on their school. If starving kids are fed, you're likely going to witness positive impacts across the board. And if you give their parents money, then yeah, probably they're going to have better food. I mean, there are obvious conclusions to draw from those things. The reason I bring all of this up is that it's incredible how little there is in
on
terms of
inflation.
thinking about the impacts of inflation on
Yeah,
society.
yeah.
So everybody agrees that too much inflation is bad. Everybody agrees that you don't want to be Zimbabwe, you don't want to be Venezuela, you don't want to be these kind of poster children of just, backward third world country societies that can have hyperinflation. We know that that's bad because the money loses its value. But astonishingly little time has been spent on trying to think about the true consequences of even low inflation or medium inflation or high inflation. What happens if everything's devaluing, or if money's devaluing by 3% per year versus 0% or 5% or 10%? How are those things
Yeah,
reflected?
it's intentional.
Of course, it's intentional. There's no way that you're going to get a central bank to happily sign off on your research grant when you're trying to say, you know what, I think your 2% inflation targeting is leading to a lot more voodoo sacrifices
Yeah.
in the capital city. I don't think they're going to be keen about doing an econometric analysis or something like this.
No, about funding that research. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Go do some econometric research about some insignificant thing about how climate change is making uh, African girls score worse on exams or something or the other, and argue for
Mm-hmm.
why we need more money to be spent. Then yeah, you'll get funding for
You'll
that.
get funding. Yeah,
But
yeah,
to try and
yeah.
say that the research, the inflation that the central bank is doing is actually causing extremely terrible things is just not a question we ask. And so the entire thing is, I think the reason they act with mockery, in my opinion, is because they're conditioned to not go down that avenue, not even question this line of inquiry, because we know that inflation, everybody knows that 2% inflation is fine, 3% inflation is fine. You don't want it to go too much above that. You don't want it to be lower than that because God forbid, people's money appreciates and they stop getting poorer. You don't want that. So they're just conditioned to think of it this way. And then it's discomforting to notice this extremely gaping hole in your logic, this giant elephant in the room that you're not allowed to think of, which is, okay, well, apply this economic method of thinking to the question of the marginal, the decline in the marginal valuation of money over time, because because of the increase in the supply of money, and then see how that is going to impact all kinds of social and economic and political phenomena in society. It's astonishing. I think just how much more research could be done on this question and how much more data can be studied. But there's just no interest in this kind of stuff.
No, nobody has time for that. Nobody has time for that. It's the same everywhere. It's the same here. It's the same here. The climate hustle is very strong here. It's very, very strong. If I want to, I know how to become rich in this country. I'm, at least for my culture, for my people, I'm very well spoken. I know how to present myself. So I know how to. I'm very, very good at writing, if I do say so myself. So I know how to write a proposal and reach out to the climate people. But then my conscience, I wouldn't be able to sleep well. So people do that nonsense here. Nigeria is one of the largest oil producers in the world. At least we should be in the top. We used to be in the top 10, but I don't know if we're still in the top 10. But we have oil reserves in this country, right? But then there are people who are collecting money from Western NGOs and Western organizations and the UN and pushing that what the solution to Nigeria's problem is less energy. I mean, while recording this, the power literally just went out while recording this. If I didn't have a flashlight here, it would have been almost complete darkness, right? And then there are people saying what we need in Nigeria at this time is less energy because some person gave them. Anyway, let's like go off on a tangent. The hustle is real here as well. They also do that. They take them around the world. They travel to Geneva and all sorts of places to take pictures with those creeps, and then they come back and sell their country anyway. So yeah, that's a thing here as well. So But
Yeah, it's everywhere and it's incredible. I also had Jasper Machugo. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a Kenyan farmer who's also on Twitter, and he was also discussing the same concept in Kenyans. Just this focus on sustainability and saving the environment by making Kenyan farmers have to dig the ground with their own bare hands rather than with any kind of machinery because it consumes energy and produces
energy,
carbon dioxide. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous death cult.
yeah, it is. It truly is. It truly is. I agree.
So to get back to the point, I would agree with you on this, and I think if you look at the examples of hyperinflation, people are familiar with the example of hyperinflation. The Weimar Republic is
Yeah.
something that's pretty well known. Most people
Yeah.
understand when you say Weimar, they think hyperinflation, and they think societal collapse. They think no bread on the shelves and families falling apart, people killing each other in the street, crime, all kinds of horrible things. So people are familiar with the idea that hyperinflation is bad. But then it's just very difficult for them to make the very logical conclusion, which is that, well, if a lot of this thing causes a lot of societal degradation, then wouldn't you expect that a little bit of it would cause some societal degradation? I mean, it seems like a natural conclusion. It doesn't necessarily have to be true. It could be the case, of course, that a little bit of something is good for you, but too much is bad. But you can't completely discount the possibility that a little bit of a bad thing is also a bad thing. And in fact, we find a stunning amount of evidence to show this to be the case. You look at saving rates, for instance, they declined incredibly between the 19th century and the 20th century. You look at the amount of the amount of committed relationships, the amount of marriage breakdown.
Marriage, yeah.
You see this affected in all kinds of things. And I think what unites so many of those things is time preference, is the fact that people have a lower time preference when they can rely on their money to transfer value to the future. Because I have this money, I can save it, and it can help me keep my wealth into the future. Well, now the future is something that I can look forward to. And so I start progressively discounting the future less and less, start planning for the future more and more, start working for the future more and more. Whereas on the other hand, if my money starts losing value and is getting destroyed in terms of its value, then I'm going to discount the future more heavily, and I'm going to care less and less about it. And that's going to be reflected in all kinds of ways in which I behave. It's going to make it harder for me to behave like a civilized human being because I don't really value the rewards of being a civilized person over the next 10 years.
Yeah. What's the point?
Yeah, what's the point? In 10 years' time, I don't even know if I'm going to be alive or if I'm going to have food on the table in 10 years' time. I need to get food on the table today. So if I can't get food on the table today, if I can't save for the future, you're going to see the less civilized aspect of humanity come out. And you'll see this everywhere. It's happened everywhere where you see hyperinflation, you see it with low degrees of inflation. And I think, I hadn't heard you make this example before. I don't know if you discussed it on Twitter, but I would agree with you. I would be shocked if this was not the case. I think more inflation leads to all kinds of these things. And people are just taught to rationalize it away. Well, it's the fault of capitalism. It's the fault of capitalists. It's the fault of the system. It's the fault of this or that or the other thing. Anything but blaming the inflation. Because the inflation pays their bills in most cases. Well, they're economists at least.
Yeah. So the what provokes me here is that most of the people you find defending the inflation are not benefiting from the inflation. They've just been indoctrinated that way. It's what they learned in school, that inflation is good. You know, we have one of the leading analysts on Twitter who, okay, let me not say much about that. So we have one of the leading analysts on Twitter who says that growth is impossible without inflation. Right, this man, I know for a fact that he's not close to the money spigot because he's very anti the current government, right? But you hear them say things like they argue so passionately in favor of inflating the currency. They just can't understand, they can't conceive. I mean, so I've made many a prediction concerning the Nigerian economy Of course, as it is with Austrian economics, it's difficult to make pinpoint accurate predictions. You can't say in exactly 5 months this is going to happen, but we can make broad generalizations, right? The prices are going to rise here. This is going to happen there. It's not specific, but so far I'm like 3 for 3 in all the predictions I've made, and these rivals, these inflation economists, they failed in their predictions, but they never say, "Oh, we were wrong. Let us backtrack um, and see what the there is no introspection whatsoever. It's very frustrating. It's frustrating, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, a lot of people do get paid to promote these ideas, but you're right. The tragic thing is all the drones that are not even paid to promote it, but yet nonetheless keep going around promoting it.
Yeah.
It's sad and it's depressing, and it's really particularly depressing in a place like Nigeria, because it's not just. I mean, in the U.S., there's a much bigger margin of safety for people and individuals from poverty and destitution, and maybe the U.S. is a bad example at this point because there's I was going to say homelessness, but wouldn't surprise me if the U.S. has even higher homelessness rates than Nigeria at this rate.
It's unlikely, but I get the point you're making. Yeah. It's unlikely, but I get.
But
the
they're definitely trying to they're trying to catch up.
Trying to get, certainly they're trying to catch up. Certainly, California is at the head of that army.
Yeah, it's definitely doing it
up there.
Principles of Economics, my complete guide to understanding economics, is now available in hardcover, audiobook, and ebook from Saifedean.com, Amazon, and many more booksellers worldwide. And now I am also teaching a course based on this book on my website, Saifedean.com. Principles of Economics will run the whole academic year, from September to June, and will have a new lecture every 2 weeks, as well as weekly live online discussion seminars open to learners from all over the world and from all walks of life. Whether you're a student, a professional, or a retiree, you are making economic decisions every day, and this course will arm you with the wisdom of centuries of economists to improve your economic decision-making. You'll also get a free book of Principles of Economics if you sign up for the course. Go to Saifedean.com and sign up now.
You know, something else you mentioned is these sacrifices, that people were doing sacrifices for deities, and that you see those things increase during inflation. In the Fiat Standard, I also discussed this thing, and I don't think Nigeria is unique in that respect. I think modern industrial scientific societies also do sacrifices for their deities. They sacrifice old and young people in the winter who freeze to death because we need to make the cost of electricity and heating and coal and fuel expensive to fix the weather. And so if that means tens of thousands more people die every winter, then it's a price to pay, because you're appeasing the weather gods. It's really incredible. Most people look down on societies like Nigeria or the Aztecs when they say, "Oh no, they're doing ritual sacrifices. Those Nigerians are barbarians." Yeah, and so why is Germany closing its coal plants and its nuclear plants and destroying its industry and forcing its pensioners to go cold and freeze in the winter? How is that different? You're sacrificing it to a deity that's going to fix your weather for you.
I have never thought of it that way. I have a new argument to use against those Westerners who like to talk that nonsense. I've never thought of that. It actually is. I thought you were going to say, because I haven't read the Fiat Standard yet, so I thought you were going to talk about abortion, right? So when you said sacrificing to the weather god, it's a different kind of sacrifice, but a sacrifice nevertheless. I would keep that one in my vault to use against them.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable, the linkages between civilization and money, and we just keep unraveling more layers to this onion. And the more you look into it, the more you peel, you find more and more and more layers. And I think this is another one. I don't think it's a coincidence that when societies lose hard money and they become susceptible to all kinds of crazy ideas, you lose the ability to think rationally and critically and reasonably about ideas, and you become more and more desperate, and therefore more and more likely to be led to believe in nonsense. And that, in my mind, explains a lot of this. It explains why more sacrifices happen in Nigeria after hyperinflation, and why 1970s in the industrial economies of the world, when hyperinflation happened, all these crazy environmentalist cults started demanding sacrifices for the gods. In the 70s, it was because we are running out of everything. We don't have enough oil. We're going to run out of nickel. We're going to run out of zinc. We're going to run out of all those things. And so the only way that we can save ourselves is if we sacrifice all of those things. And so we can leave them in earth, and we can only use a tiny little bit of them before we run out and go extinct. And then when that didn't happen, when it turned out in the 1980s, once the inflation had subsided, or at least declined significantly, all of these things that they said were going to run out became a lot more abundant, and they became cheaper. And the reason they became cheaper was because inflation declined, not because magically God decided
resources appeared to bless the earth with it.
Yeah, God didn't just decide to 10x all of our resources. We still have the same earth, but
maybe their gods accepted their sacrifice. Who knows?
Or maybe God accepted. Yeah, I know
their God accepted their sacrifice.
We can't write that one off. Yeah, we can't write that hypothesis off. Yeah, we need to test it more rigorously, perhaps. We need to do more sacrifices, I think, and test them. That would be the scientific thing to do. Try all kinds of sacrifice.
No, I said they should start with themselves.
But the interesting thing is that they mock these shamans and these tribal leaders who do these sacrifices. And of course, we grow up learning stories about how the scientific method is better, because these guys, obviously it doesn't work. And then when you sacrifice your daughter and God doesn't bring the rain that you asked for, then the shaman always has a story. Oh, well, it didn't work because your daughter had the wrong color of hair, or because you didn't cut it properly, or you didn't do something like this. So then he comes up with a new thing. Okay, now we need to sacrifice your son, and this will bring the rain. And you're incapable of thinking of, hang on, if sacrificing my daughter didn't bring the rain, then why should I listen to you when you tell me to sacrifice my son? You're still insisting that you're using the same framework for analysis, and it didn't work. So why should I trust it? And so we like to mock these people, but that's exactly what the environmental movement and the modern witch doctors have done, because they went from, in the 1970s, you need to stop consuming because we are running out of things, to, in the 1990s, you need to stop consuming because we have so much of those things that the pollution that we're producing is going to overwhelm the world. Those are two mutually exclusive and contradictory statements. They're the opposite. Either we're running out of oil, or we're going to produce so much oil byproducts like CO2 that's going to destroy the environment. They can't both be true. Yeah, but doesn't matter. You shift from this to the other one, just like you shift from sacrificing your daughter to sacrificing your son. And you always have something new to blame, and you always have some new sacrifice to be demanded of you.
Very interesting way to put it. I haven't really considered it in this way before, but it's you documented it in the Fiat Standard, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, not so much the part about child sacrifice. I do have a thread on Twitter about the child sacrifice. It's something about 97% of priests all agree that child sacrifice is necessary for good weather.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen that. I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that one. I believe I saw that too.
I just did a whole thread going through all of the different arguments that you usually hear from the climate cult, and just applying the same thing to child sacrifice, because it is the same thing. And, all the experts agree that children should be sacrificed. Why do you, just another peasant, think that you know what's best to be done with your child? Listen to the science and hand over your child.
Another way that inflation has ruined society. There's a lecture that I gave at a university here last year. Phil Bishop took a clip and put it on Twitter sometime last year. So another way the inflation. So at the lecture, I spoke about how inflation is actually damaging families. It's not just these other things we've mentioned. It's ruining families here. So normally when a child gets to a certain age in our culture, it's expected that, especially for the male children, it's expected that they will leave the nest, they'll leave their parents' homes. But you have men in their 40s 30s, 40s, still living in their father's houses. Nobody can afford to buy a home. And it's gotten particularly worse these days because you can't even rent a home. Fortunately for me, I got a home before any of this madness started, so I escaped that. But you can't buy a home now. You can't rent a home. There is no unless you're a politician, you are a very, very big businessman who is in bed with the government, or you are a maybe a celebrity or something. You can't. It's very difficult to buy a home in this country. It's almost impossible. Considering current wage levels and the prices of homes, it's impossible. So you now have you have grown up people in their 40s moving back in with their parents. You have things like that happen, and imagine how much conflict there would be when a 40-year-old man lives with his parents, sometimes with his wife and children. So it's even causing families to have conflict. It's causing, you hear parents say things like, when I was your age, I had moved out of my father's house, and the parents don't know enough to recognize that or maybe they're just unwilling to recognize that things are very, very different now than they were when they were younger. And then these things agitate. I mean, I talk to young people all the time, so I hear these stories. I am a young person myself. So you hear them talk. These people tell you how my parents are getting on my nerves. Our parents don't, the parents in this generation don't understand that things were much easier back then, right? But things are so difficult right now, especially right now, given the inflation, and it's causing a rift between families. There is this thing where husband and wife are fighting. What do you bring to the table? I know they have those conversations there, but it's sort of worse here because one income is no longer sufficient to take care of the family. Two incomes is no longer sufficient to take care of the family. So there's friction between father and mother. So it's not just between husband and wife. It's not just parent and children. And these things have gotten far worse in the last maybe 4 or 5 years. We've always had these things, but they are in this is the worst it has been at least in my lifetime, and I was born in the 80s. So yeah, that's just another way the inflation is damaging society, and that's why I focus. The bulk of my work here is monetary economics. I focus mostly on money. The biggest part of my advocacy, 70% of what I talk about, is sound money. We need sound money. We need to reverse this problem by adopting sound money. Fix the money, fix the people, as I usually say. Apparently, that's not something a lot of Bitcoiners, a lot of Austrian economists say the same thing, and I never heard anyone say that. It's just something that occurred to me. If you fix if the money is responsible for the decline in society, then if you fix the money, then you stand a chance of fixing the people. So fix the money, fix the people. That's what I say.
Yeah, no, I agree with you entirely. I think the issue on house prices is a very important point that I don't think gets emphasized enough. And that's the fact that people think it's normal for house prices to continue to rise, but house prices are not rising. Usually they are declining in real terms, but they are rising in terms of money that is inflating.
Yeah.
And then it starts to rise in real terms, I think, because of the fact that it rises less. That it declines in value less than the money. So that then makes it an obvious store of value. So everybody out there is using their home as their saving account, using their home as their Bitcoin wallet. It's just a very stupid way of using Bitcoin. It's more scarce than money because it's a lot easier to print money, government money, than it is to make a new house. So a house, in a sense, is a better asset to hold than your government's money, or even your government's bonds, or your government's bank accounts. But because people end up buying the house as a saving account, they overinvest in houses. They buy more houses than they need. So A, they'll buy a bigger house, or B, more commonly, they'll buy a house to rent it out, even though that's not their job. So you'll be a doctor or an engineer, and you've worked all your life, you own your own house, and now you've got money and you want to invest that money and you have nowhere to obvious to put it. So you think, all right, I'll just buy a house and rent it out. Now, what you're doing when you decided to buy a house with that money that you don't plan on investing in real estate, because let's say you're a doctor, you wake up every morning and you go to your clinic and you work in curing people. You're not in the business of running real estate. You're not in the business of dealing with tenants and doing apartment showings. So it's not your work. It's not your line of investment. And the only reason you're doing it is because you don't have a decent money. If you had a decent money, you just, if you could get a form of money that you could just get a 1 or 2% appreciation per year, because it's hard, because it appreciates, and then you wouldn't get into the whole business of being a landlord, and you would just focus on being a doctor. Take all the time you spend being a landlord on becoming a better doctor, increase your income, and then save it in money. So when you don't have a good money, people who have money don't hold money. And so what do they hold instead? They hold houses. And so instead of you as a 30-year-old young worker being able to buy that house, now you're competing with all of your first of all, you're competing with all the other 30-year-olds looking to buy the house, but also you're competing with all the 60-year-olds looking to buy their second house and third house. And they have more money. They bid the price of the house up, and then they price you out of the market, and then you have to rent. And so we're getting rid of the concept of home ownership. We're destroying the concept of home ownership, because inflation means that people who have money continue to accumulate more and more houses, and people who don't have money continue to pay rent. And so people who have money can protect themselves from inflation because they hold more and more houses, and the houses appreciate over time relatively, whereas people who don't have houses can just never get on that first step of the ladder towards beating inflation, because they try and save their money. They say they can only save it in liquid assets, and these are constantly being devalued, whether it's dollars or physical cash. You know, in the developing world, it's usually physical cash, or in the developed world, it's usually something like a bank account. Well, that stuff doesn't beat inflation. So the house is becoming more and more expensive every year, because all those old people are buying them as second and third houses, and you're going to be renting forever.
It's almost like you live here. When you were describing what you described happens almost exactly here. The only difference is it's not always older people buying houses. It's people who are close to the money spigot, right? The government officials, old and young, people who are close to the new money. Once they get the money, they just go and build houses, build housing estates. That's what we call them here. So it's a very interesting thought. Very, very interesting. We have houses everywhere, literally everywhere. Houses are just appearing everywhere. So it's a very good explanation. It fits. The inflation is responsible because what you hear people say here is that housing is the best investment. That's what you hear them say, right? So it makes a whole lot of sense what you're saying. They're trying to hedge against inflation. They know it's pointless to hold the money. I mean, if the money held its value, that would be something. I mean, it would be much better if it appreciates in value, but it would be sufficient for it to just hold its value, just remain at the same level, but it's the value of the currency declines every couple of months. So it only makes sense for people to find a way to store to store their value, right? And then homes is the go-to thing here. So it's a very interesting theory. I'll look more into it, but it adds up. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think it's not just in Nigeria. I think it's everywhere. Everywhere has inflation. Nigeria might have it worse than other places, but it's the same trend everywhere. People all over the world are buying their houses as saving accounts. People all over the world are having to learn how to manage a rental and how to manage an Airbnb, because they can't just focus on being a brain surgeon or a cab driver or an artist or whatever. You can't just focus on your job and earn your money. As I say, the problem with fiat money is that you have to earn it twice. Once when you work for it, and once when you have to invest in order to beat inflation.
Honestly, it's almost like you live here. Even when you said the Airbnb thing, it's a very common thing here now. Wow, that's very interesting. I have so many new arguments to use against my enemies going forward. So thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'm glad to help.
This podcast is also brought to you by the Bitcoin Way, your professional Bitcoin IT team offering you personalized, secure, and comprehensive solutions for every step along your Bitcoin journey. The Bitcoin Way offer live concierge service to guide you with your Bitcoin cold storage, running your node, privacy best practices, inheritance planning, corporate strategy, and multi-sig solutions. They don't touch your coins, they guide you through the process of acquiring your coins and securing them. If you'd like to make your setup safer and more reliable, book a consult with them and see what they have to suggest. If you want to give someone the gift of Bitcoin, get them this professional service that will ensure they start off knowing exactly how to manage their coins and not lose them. Go to thebitcoinway.com and start Bitcoining more confidently. This podcast is brought to you by my friends at Coinbits, the oldest Bitcoin-only exchange. If you're listening to this podcast, you get that Bitcoin upends everything that government schools teach about money. Coinbits is the money app designed for people like you who understand Bitcoin and want to use it every day. Coinbits pioneered the concept of roundups, which converts your spare change into Bitcoin. Simply connect your debit and credit cards and your usual purchases are rounded up to the nearest dollar, letting you save more in Bitcoin as you spend more. My favorite new Coinbits feature is Spending Insights, which gives you real-time feedback about how much of your money is chasing high-time preference, short-term gratification, and how much you are providing for your future with low-time preference choices. As always, Coinbits provides a terrific self-custody experience. Connect a hardware wallet for automatic withdrawals, so you keep counterparty risk to a minimum. Coinbits also offers peer-to-peer cash and Bitcoin payments, target orders, price alerts, and more. Coinbits can help you do almost anything you need with Bitcoin. Go to coinbits.app/Saifedean and get 3 months free. Again, that is coinbits.app/Saifedean, Saifedean.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the history of Nigeria and how you think what do you think of the causes of the current economic problems in Nigeria? So, of course, and I've read one of the blog posts. Most people will generally tell you that it's because of colonialism, it's because of imperialism. I get it, you disagree. We've also had Magat Wade on the podcast here before. She also disagrees with that and offers very interesting perspectives. So tell us, what do you think is the driver of the main problems in Nigeria?
It's poor economic policy. There's nothing else, unless maybe you're asking what's responsible for poor economic policy. And of course, the answer to that is what is taught at universities. Right, so it's just as simple as that. Poor economic policy. I don't think it's colonialism. So someone put up a video today. There is this Christian preacher, motivational speaker who died a couple of years ago, and he was talking about how when the white man left here, when the white man left Africa, the white man didn't teach us how to make finished products. So he gave an example that the white man taught us to pick cotton, but not how to make clothes out of cotton. And lots of people were tweeting out like, this is the exact problem with Nigeria. And I'm like, are we retarded? Why? I mean, what stops people from learning how to make clothes today? People make clothes in Nigeria as we speak, right? So he was trying to blame the problems in Africa on the colonial masters, that they didn't teach us how to do things, which is just verifiably false, because we can produce pretty much everything here, right? There's not literally everything, but there's nothing that everything we need we produce here. We produce clothes, we produce food. Maybe we assemble cars, we manufacture cars. It's still producing cars here. We've begun to do that. We've made phones in the past. We've made computers in the past. So we can make stuff, right? And even if we can't, it's very easy to learn to make stuff. We have Nigerians literally everywhere in the world, every institution, every country, working in every company. You have Nigerians. So it's not that Nigerians or Africans don't know how to make stuff. So that reasoning is clearly false. So what then is responsible for people not being able to make stuff in Nigeria? Because ignorance is not an excuse. It's no longer an excuse. Perhaps one could have gotten away with that excuse 30, 40, 50 years ago, but you can't use that as an excuse any longer. The recipes, as Mrs. puts them, as Austrian economists put them, the recipes are available. So anyone can just easily learn how to make whatever. The resources actually happen to be here as well. Nigeria, Africa is pretty resource rich. Everyone knows that. Um, and one factor that one will consider when maybe setting up industry, setting up a factory, sometimes nearness to raw materials is also a consideration. One could also consider cheap labor. Africa has very, very cheap labor. Very, very cheap labor we have here in Africa. So all the conditions that one would assume are necessary for production, we have them here, right? But why won't people produce here? As Magat says, and she's a friend. I call her my big sister. As she says, the problem is bad economic policy. It's taxation. Nigeria has a corporate income tax of 30%, a personal income tax of 24%. We have a value added tax. We have a consumption tax. In Nigeria, there are at least 200 official and unofficial taxes, right? So you are taxed as a producer several times. You are taxed as a consumer several times. So why in God's name would I bring my business here when I can't make any money from doing my business here, right? Why would some foreigner bring his factory and establish and bring his business and be close to raw materials here and exploit the cheap labor, as they say? Why wouldn't someone do that? My taxes are very expensive, and then regulations are another thing. Nigerians are regulated 6 ways to Sunday, as they say. There are so many regulations, so everything. So for instance, the energy sector in Nigeria has about 11 different regulators, regulating 11 different agencies regulating just the energy sector. So sometimes you have this body would make this regulation, and then this body would make this regulation that counters it. It's a mess. So we have regulation upon regulation upon regulation in the country. And of course, when you have excessive regulation, it makes, when you have regulation, you've already made room for corruption. If you have someone as a referee saying who can and who can't play and how they should play, obviously they'll start to play favorites, right? If I give money to the regulator, they can stop, they can prevent competitors from coming in or make regulations that will make it difficult for them to survive in the market, and so on. Right. So we have the problem of taxation, we have the problem of regulation, and in my opinion, the most important component of why people would not, why Nigeria is the way it is, why people would not do business here is the money. It's the money. That is, in my opinion, literally the biggest problem. If some foreign investor wants to bring in $1 million to Nigeria to invest, so he brings in $1 million, and at today's exchange rate, he gets about 1.6 billion naira for $1 million. By the time he wants to repatriate his money back, right? By the time he wants to take his money back, he might need 1.9 billion to get that same $1 million. So that also, should I say, disincentivizes people from coming to invest in the country. So the money has to be fixed. We have to cut down on regulations. We have to cut in taxes. Now, being an anarcho-capitalist myself, I don't believe any taxes or regulation should exist, but I don't live in a society that people aren't ready for those discussions at all here, at all. So the Overton window is not large enough to accommodate these kinds of conversations. So I do my best and try to be minarchist for the sake of my people. So I argue, okay, why don't we just have one tax? Just one tax, the corporate income tax. Leave it at below 5%, at most 5%, right? That would even create more revenues for the government. It's not like I want the government to have more revenues, but then you have more people, because not everyone can pay 30% tax in that. Not every, very few people can pay 30% tax in addition to all the other taxes. So if they cut taxes to, I suggest 5% or lower, just that one tax, doing this and cutting those regulations literally makes Nigeria perhaps the cheapest place in the world to do business. Because everywhere you look, you see taxes at 24%, at 20%, at 19%. So if you cut taxes, I say this, if you cut taxes to 5% or less, and then you cut regulation, and then we have sound money. Nigeria overnight. Now, as if you factor in the fact that labor is affordable here, it's in abundant supply, and the price is pretty low. So wages are low here. If you put all these things together, combine that with the fact that we have Nigeria is very resource rich, Nigeria automatically becomes the cheapest and perhaps the best place in the world to do business. But no one listens. So it's all bad policy. It's not colonialism. It's not corruption. Those things are symptoms of, or rather, not colonialism. Corruption is a symptom of a much larger problem, which is bad economic policy, regulation, and taxation, to be specific. So that's my.
Yeah, I mean, I think my listeners would not be surprised to hear that I pretty much agree with you on everything that you said here. But I think a good counter argument that's given to this is usually, okay, well, look at your average dysfunctional European banana republic these days, and they've got all of that stuff. I mean, they do a better job of pretending to not have that stuff, but really, there's corruption in France, in Britain, in the US, in Canada. There's a lot higher taxes probably than in Nigeria. There's all kinds of licensing and regulation to restrict entry into businesses, all kinds of monopolies. And yet things aren't quite as bad as Nigeria. So what's your response to that? And I'm setting you up here because I know your response and I agree with it. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. So in my opinion, the West has already built a capital base. The West is a capital-rich society, right? So before let me put it this way. Nigeria, Africa, the third world, we haven't had our chance with capitalism. We haven't had our chance to build up capital, right? So the West, the capital they're enjoying now is capital that was built around the Industrial Revolution, the late 1800s, the early 1900s, and then they're enjoying the capital that was built that period. They're actually they are depleting that capital. Yes. So I said, if you give the West another 50 years of this madness, the West will be indistinguishable from Africa in terms of, or the third world, the developing world, with in terms of the economy, right? So I have friends all over the world in different places. So it encourages me to look into their economies and stuff. So when people talk about free education that they have in places like in Europe, in Finland and all those places, I see reports of some of those free, and they're not free. You and I know that they're not free, but they're starting to pull back some of those, at least the sensible countries. I think I saw Finland used to have this program where they would just let anyone come in and get free education, right? So I think, I can't remember exactly, this was years ago, maybe it was Finland, but one of those countries decided we're not doing that any longer. It's no longer sustainable for them to do that. Everyone is talking about Social Security in America going bust pretty soon, right? They've kicked the can so long that I think they're almost at the end of the road now. And in a couple of years, Social Security would be absolutely bust. It will go bust. So the West the West survives despite these taxes and regulations and inflation, because they already have a capital stock that they've accumulated. They accumulated before they started to implement these ridiculous, destructive, suicidal policies. So that's my answer to. That is the answer that I give to people who ask such questions.
Yeah, I agree. In the Fiat Standard as well, I make the point, which is that you could think of the developing world as being the parts of the world that got fiat money before they got industrialization. I think this is how to think of it, because if you look at how industrialization spread out of Northwest Europe, basically, from Britain, France, Holland, Belgium, and Germany, and then it spread east and south from that, and of course the US as well. But in terms of the old world, it spread east and south from Northwest Europe. And if you look at the world of the year 1900, I mean, it was it seems like a pretty clear narrative of how progress happens. So if you're close to the industrialists, you start importing capital productivity goes up, living standards go up, cities become cleaner, you're able to build modern infrastructure, you're able to treat wastewater, you're able to treat sewage, and then you're able to build the modern infrastructure. So then the cities develop, and then the economies of the cities become the drivers of economic growth, industrialization, increased productivity, and that causes the transformation that takes you from an agrarian, predominantly poor, low life expectancy, low education, high infant mortality society to one that is the opposite: high income, high productivity, primarily urban, primarily industrial,
high life expectancy.
High life expectancy, low infant mortality. All of these things happen when you get those machines. And that seems to me like a process that was unfolding according to the rules of geography up until the early 20th century, in that think Spain was industrializing ahead of Morocco, which was industrializing ahead of Ghana, because Spain is closer to Britain and Morocco is closer to Spain and Ghana is the furthest away. So it seems to me like you would see that it was just these things were invented in that part of the world and they were beginning to spread out, and everywhere they went, they increased productivity. But then around 1914, World War I breaks out, and then the world just decides
loses its mind.
Loses its mind, exactly. It's like, somebody who was doing very well, very successful, on the verge of massive success, and then he just decides to start doing heroin every morning. that's the species equivalent of what happens when we just decide, hey, let's just print money and see what happens. We can get free roads. Yeah, we could get free roads out of this. Let's see what happens. And boom.
I agree.
You think, just nice little kick of heroin in the morning. Let's see what happens. Yeah, you've just destroyed your life. You've torpedoed your life. But that's kind of what happened to us. So since then, the way I see it, since the money was destroyed in the early 20th century, and after that, there was never a gold standard after 1914. Some people think the world went off the gold standard in 1971. Really, it was 1914.
No. Yeah.
So
after the Federal
from
Reserve,
1914 onward, nobody has had the ability to save in a form of money that is, maybe up until the 1930s, Switzerland was still on the gold standard, in Sweden. So some people did have those. But for the vast majority of humanity, they haven't had the access to a form of money that they could use for international trade and also that could hold on to its value for the future. And so for me, this is a huge part of the problem of underdevelopment, because what you got with fiat money is, first of all, you have all these central banks propping up all over the world. And then because they're central banks, they're issuing their own currency. Now the trade in those countries is a matter of national accounting rather than individual accounting. So before we had a central bank everywhere, then if your grandfather wanted to import something from Britain because he thought, getting this machine is going to increase our productivity, then it was a lot simpler and more straightforward for him to get it because there were a lot less trade barriers. Of course, technologically, it was more complicated back then to move it around because shipping was a lot more expensive and machines weren't as good as they are today. Yeah. But the political barriers today are bigger. Today, you can't just import and export things. If you're importing this machine, then you're sending out dollars. And if you're sending out dollars, your government is not happy because they built their entire Ponzi on the back of your dollars. Their entire government Ponzi scheme rests on the fact that the central bank holds your dollars and then the government, and then lends the government based on this money. And so when you start taking your money out to try and buy things from abroad, and when more and more people start doing this because the central bank is printing more and more money, then you're not just getting a machine that's increasing your productivity, you're getting a machine increasing your productivity at the cost of making your corrupt central bank's Ponzi unravel. So now we can't let you import capital. So now we get all these restrictions on imports and all these restrictions on exports and all these protectionism on the one hand. Then on the other hand, which might even be more significant, after we go off the gold standard, nobody has hard money. Nobody has the ability to save, and savings lose value over time. So people's ability to accumulate capital is massively compromised. And poorer societies suffered from this a lot more because when you're poor, it's harder for you to have the productivity to accumulate capital to do things that you want to do. So it keeps getting harder and harder for people to save. And I think of the reverse situation. Imagine if we'd stayed on the gold standard after 1914 and the world has continued on the gold standard. And then everyone in the world had access to a form of money that they could use, which appreciates at around 1 or 2%. Just imagine how much more capital the average Nigerian would have today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you, all of your life, everything that you've earned, you could have saved and it would have appreciated at 1% per year. So that's something like going up by 50% in 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then your father had that, and then his father had that, and his father had that. Think about how much more savings you would have. And then with those savings, you'd be able to accumulate more and more capital if you had free trade.
Mm.
And then productivity would increase. But you go on the fiat standard, and now you can't really trade and you can't really save. And the entire country is effectively run like a farm for the central bank and the people in the central bank.
Whew. Wow.
Cheerful stuff. Let's get back to talking about voodoo. That was a less barbaric form of human sacrifice.
Less depressing. Oh. Wow. You put it you put it very nicely, very beautifully. I so normally when I come on these shows, I usually do the talking, tell people about what I do, but I'm learning now. So it's not like I'm entirely unfamiliar with what you're saying, but you have a unique way of saying and honestly, this isn't flattery. You have a unique way. I was literally saying this to a friend of mine. He's in another country. He's in the West. I was trying to get him to read your principles book. I was trying to get him to buy it because I've been trying to talk to him about economics, but I can't. I can't give him Mises or Rothbard. It's too. I don't want to say it's too technical, but it's too. It seems like they were trying too much to talk to scholars that they. They're great books, right? But it's not for the uninitiated. It's not for the layman. But I know this could offend some people, but I genuinely believe your principles is the best on the subject ever. It's very easy. So I when I bought the book, I also got the audio book. So I did this thing, and it's just one large file. So I cut it into. I did some editing and cut it into chapters, so I could just listen to. Sometimes, if I want to get into an argument with someone I want to teach, I could just listen to the chapter on money. So I had to break it down into it because it's very, very easy. It's very easy to understand. So my point is, you have a way of making things very relatable to the common man. Right? So I'm saying I'm learning now. So it's not just that I'm learning. So I'm saying thank you. I don't. That's my way of saying thank you. I don't know. I
well,
tend to go
you.
on sometimes. Yeah. So it was actually very great doing this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your kind words.
Yeah. Thank you. I will be listening to this again just to catch the things you said here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that a lot coming from you. Thank you so much.
Oh, and again, this isn't flattery, right? Nigeria has a large Muslim population, and I said this to Alan Armstrong when I recorded my episode with him, Pastor Coin. I'm sure you know who that is, right? So
yes.
I said this to him that if I was to bring one economist to talk to the people in my country, it would be you, right? For several reasons. One, what I've already just stated, you have a way of breaking things down. And I don't know, maybe it's because you're also from a developing country, you're Palestinian. Maybe it's because of that. Maybe there's something about the third world psyche that you understand better than people in the West. When I listen to Western teachers, and I love all of them, Dr. Murphy, Jonathan Newman, all those guys, Joe Salerno, I love them, right? Adore them. But when I listen to them, if I give someone a regular Nigerian a Joe Salerno message to listen to, they don't usually get what he's saying. They don't understand him. But I'm sure that if I send them a Saifedean Ammous book or recording, or they would understand. There's something about the way you express. So there's that. And there's also the fact that Nigeria has a large Muslim population, and the Muslim Brotherhood, for lack of a better term, is quite strong here. It's quite strong. So if I'm going to reach out to the Muslim population, it will be very easy for me to do so when I tell them that their brother is one of the generals of this thing I'm saying. So so I told him about this. It's literally something that I'm working towards. I genuinely want to bring the Austrian ideas using, and you could go watch the interviews I've done with Dr. Murphy and other people. I've never said anything like this, so it's not flattery. I'm not making this up. It's something I thought of. Getting you to interact with the Muslim population here, they'll be very, very receptive to the ideas if it comes from a fellow Muslim and then someone who is as articulate as yourself. So you could cut this out if it's uncomfortable for you, but yeah, it's just what I was thinking.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I hope to make this kind of difference, and that's why I keep pumping out this stuff all over the world, because I keep hearing from people that tell me that it changed the way they think about the world. It increases the way that they it enhances the way that they can understand the world, and so that keeps me going. And thank you, very, very, very kind of you. And I hope I get more and more chances and opportunities to travel and talk and write and publish, so that more and more people could get exposed to these ideas. All right, so Econ Bro, tell us more about what you're doing, where people can find you online, and how they can help you.
So as I've already said, I go from city to city, state to state in my country, teaching these ideas to university students, not just university students, pretty much anyone who's willing to listen. I've been on the radio. I'm trying to get on TV, to talk to people about these ideas. So what I do is, when I go to an institution, a university, I give them free books. At the Mises Institute, they've been gracious enough to let me print their books. So I print the books here, and then I distribute it to the students absolutely for free. Absolutely for free. I do not charge anyone anything. This will be on the internet. So, and many of the students are also on Twitter, so they can see this and call me out if I'm lying. So I give it to them for free. I don't charge them for any of the lectures. So what I seek support to continue doing this work. If it touches the heart of anyone listening, to support this kind of work, and the bulk of my work is advocating for sound money. That's the bulk of what I do, and I know that would interest the Bitcoin crowd. So that's what I do. I talk to them about it. So I give free books out. So if anyone is willing to, I'm not just seeking donations in cash. I'm also seeking donations in kind. If someone has a way to give me really good, easy to read, easy to understand economic text, if you could send as many as possible to me, you've done half of the work for me. And then, of course, it costs something to travel. So if you want to find me, I have a fundraiser that I hope will be linked to this video. My Bitcoin wallet address, I hope I sent it to Thomas. And I'm on Twitter at Econ Bro, EconBreau. And my DMs are always open. You can always reach out to me and to ask me questions about the progress I've made, the network I built, the network of students, young people I built. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so just to be clear, on Twitter, it's at Econ Bro, Breau, not BRO, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll post the link to the fundraiser. Just word of advice from somebody who's in the book business. Generally, it's cheaper to just print books where you want them than to have them shipped, because shipping books is very expensive. Books are heavy. And also shipping books is, particularly in countries that have bad customs and strict customs issues. I'm sure Nigeria is like that. The books can take forever sometimes. So if you have a big shipment of books, so I think it's probably easier for you to just take cash and print books. And copyright isn't real. Well, I shouldn't say that. Intellectual monopoly isn't real.
Yeah.
And as an author, I mean, like, I think of it, obviously it would be nice if people in Nigeria could buy my book and I'd get full royalties of it. But realistically, I'm not going to run a book printing and distribution business in Nigeria, and trying to send books away, trying to send books from in the US or Europe to Nigeria is enormously expensive. So if somebody in Nigeria prints my book, and reads it, I'm not going to be upset about it. So
Okay, that's good.
at least you have my permission to go and pirate my books and give them out.
Thank you.
I think with a lot of the Austrians, their books are also available. So
Yeah, I already do that with the Mises Institute. They let me print all their books for free.
nice.
Yeah, so
Excellent.
I give out their books. So now I have your book in addition to theirs that I will print and give out to students. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you.
I should say I don't really own the rights to the Bitcoin Standard. I own the rights to the other two books. So I can't really tell you to go and
Oh no,
print
it's
the Bitcoin Standard.
just the principles. Just the principles.
But I'm not going to tell you to do it. But that doesn't mean you can't do it, I guess. Yeah, principles. Okay, well, that I own the rights for it. So go ahead, knock yourself out.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the very interesting and informative conversation. And I wish you all the best of luck in everything that you do.
Thank you very much for having me. God bless you.
Cheers, man. Take care. Bye-bye.